Episode 7 finally gives Knox's father a place in the main mystery. Knox reluctantly goes looking for him after years of wanting nothing to do with him, learns in episode 6 that he supposedly died 2 years earlier, and then Mark Chambers, the guy in the wheelchair, reveals in episode 7 that the death was staged. Harwood helped him disappear because Knox's father had made something for him, and I think that one detail connects the missing critical supply, Glenda's impossible travel time, Orla Kent's murder, and everything strange that's been happening in the mines. Before I get into it, if you're new here, this channel tracks theories exactly like this one against the show as new episodes land, so subscribe if you want to see whether this one holds up. The relationship between Knox and his father was already strange before Season 3 started digging into it. Back in Season 2, Knox visits Mark Chambers, and Mark tells him, "You're your old man's son." Knox answers that sometimes he isn't sure whether that's a good thing, and Mark immediately tells him it is, because without Knox's father, he never would have made it out. We still haven't been told what Mark needed to get out of, but the important part of that scene is the way somebody else remembers Knox's father. Knox carries resentment toward him, while Mark remembers a man who once got him out of something serious. Episode 6 fills in why Knox feels the way he does. His father was a miner who also worked as a smuggler, and he abandoned Knox and his mother. Knox has stayed away from him for years, which is why Billings and Hank have such a hard time convincing him to help with the investigation. Going back into the mines means dealing with a part of his life he clearly wanted behind him, and when he finally does it, he's told his father died 2 years earlier. Then, in episode 7, Mark Chambers changes the entire story. Knox goes back to him for real answers, and Mark tells him the tunnel collapse death was a cover, his father wanted to disappear, Harwood helped fake it, and the payment was something Knox's father built for him. Mark also warns Knox that digging any further into Harwood's business is a good way to vanish for real, and that's not a small thing coming from Mark specifically. This is a man who owes Knox's father his own life and still works comfortably enough under Harwood. Even he's telling Knox to stop looking. That tells us the disappearance was planned well enough that people in the mines believed he'd actually died, including his own son, and whatever he built had enough value for Harwood to help erase him from normal silo life. I think he built Harwood a hidden transport system through the mines. There's already a huge amount of evidence pointing toward one. Season 3 starts by reminding us how ridiculous the mines are underneath Silo 18. Harwood explains that the pact limits how far miners can dig outward, roughly 200 feet, so 300 years of mining have left them with tunnels and shafts that keep doubling back on themselves. People have been digging through that area for generations, which means Harwood controls a maze underneath the silo that almost nobody above him could possibly know, as well as the miners do. Glenda Harwood then gives us the clearest sign that someone is using that maze for more than mining. When Billings and Hank get access to the surveillance footage, they find Glenda near the mines and then around Supply less than 10 minutes later. The normal route through Silo 18 can't account for that travel time, and the episode itself draws attention to it, because Billings and Hank know there's a missing part of her journey, and I think that's exactly what she's using, whatever Knox's father built. That's not even the first time Judicial had reason to look at her. Before Orla ever took the job, Glenda was Carla's own shadow in Supply, until she was pulled from the role, and it's Orla herself who ends up opening an investigation into her once she takes over. Whatever that investigation actually turned up was never resolved on screen, and episode 6 is the first time that old suspicion and the missing critical supply start looking like the same problem. Season 2 already established that powered vertical transport exists inside Silo 18. When Knox, Shirley, Walker, and Carla are trying to get back down the silo, Carla brings up a descender rig, a powered winch and table system the porters had quietly kept out of circulation. Since porters have the exclusive right to move goods through the silo, and something like that surfacing would raise questions, Knox and Shirley end up stealing it from them to make their own escape. So the technology needed to move somebody quickly through a vertical shaft is already sitting inside the story. A permanent version built into one of the old mining shafts could move a person through huge sections of Silo 18 without putting them on the main staircase, and the same system could carry cargo just as easily. Knox's father was a miner and a smuggler, so he had every reason to understand the value of a route that bypassed the public way of moving people and goods. It also explains why Harwood would value what he built so highly. Harwood controls the mines, while his daughter Glenda used to be Carla's shadow in Supply. Glenda therefore had access to the department where goods were stored, and her father controlled the maze where those goods could disappear. Gives that family a private transport route connecting the two sides, and suddenly, Glenda's impossible 10-minute journey has a very simple explanation. That connection gets a lot stronger once Orla enters the story, because Orla takes over as Carla's shadow and almost immediately starts noticing something's wrong. She tells Juliet that a large amount of critical supply has gone missing, and specifically says she thinks it may be moving through construction. These are items that were loaded into Silo 18 when it was built, and some of them can't be replaced once the remaining stock runs out. Orla then goes home and tells her boyfriend that she wants to return to the construction area, because she saw a gap that might explain how somebody was moving the supplies. I think she saw part of the route since construction had opened an area that was normally hidden, and for someone already looking for a way to move stolen goods through the silo, that gap gave her enough to start putting the pieces together. She never gets the chance to tell anyone what she found. When her body eventually turns up in the mines, medical determines the fumigation didn't kill her. She'd been struck hard in the back of the head, likely with rebar, and her body was found inside a closed-off tunnel. Somebody killed Orla before the gas incident and used the mines to hide what happened to her. I think Orla was killed because she found Knox's father's route. Her investigation started with missing critical supply, then led her toward construction, where she noticed a gap that could explain how the material was being moved. Her body later turns up inside the same mining network that Glenda can somehow move through faster than the normal silo allows. Harwood controls that network, and episode 7 tells us that Glenda's father once paid Knox's father to build something for him. And once those details sit together, the murder starts fitting into the same story as the missing supplies. Carla later shows Billings how bad the theft has become. Critical supply contains things the silo can't manufacture for itself, and the losses have reduced some of those reserves to roughly 2 years. The grow lights are especially dangerous, because once the replacements are gone, the farms eventually lose the equipment they need to keep producing food. Carla understood the situation well enough that she made Orla her shadow specifically to find out who'd been stealing from critical supply. The amount missing is what makes the transport system theory work so well for me. Somebody has been removing huge quantities of restricted material over a long period of time, inside a silo where almost everything normally has to travel on the staircase. Carrying that much stolen material through public levels would create constant chances for porters, workers, or cameras to see it. A hidden powered route through the old mine shafts changes the logistics completely. Goods could leave supply, pass into a concealed access point, and move vertically without ever appearing on the staircase. Glenda's surveillance footage would then look exactly the way it does now, cameras catching her at one end of the journey and then catching her again somewhere else, while the part that actually matters happens completely out of view. The old descender rig makes this even more convincing, because the pack tells us exactly why powered movement is dangerous to the official system. Porters have the exclusive right to move goods, and a powered winch lets somebody bypass them entirely. Knox's father could have taken that basic idea much further, installing a permanent system inside shafts Harwood already controlled. His smuggling background fits that job perfectly. A smuggler inside Silo 18 has the same basic problem every time he moves something illegal. The stairs are public, travel takes time, and everyone knows where the normal routes are. A private shaft solves all of that, especially when the man building it has spent his working life inside 300 years of mining tunnels. There's a simpler version of this same idea worth taking seriously, because it doesn't need a winch, a cable, or any moving parts at all. What Knox's father actually dealt in were diamond drill bits, smuggled in disguised as jewelry, which is exactly the kind of equipment you'd use to cut through rock rather than build a machine to move through it. So maybe what he made for Harwood was simpler than a transport system in the mechanical sense, just a hole, a bored passage connecting 2 points the official map doesn't show. That's arguably the stronger read. A rigged cable system needs power and upkeep and parts that can fail or get noticed. A bored passage just sits there, finished, silent, and that's exactly why nobody's found it in years. Either way, the destination is the same. Knox's father used equipment nobody else in the silo had reason to own to cut an unauthorized route through solid rock. Whether it's a machine or just a hole matters less than the fact that it's there. It also makes the deal with Harwood much easier to understand. Faking a death inside Silo 18 is a huge favor, because Knox's father gets to disappear without people continuing to look for him. Harwood receives a transport system that gives his people a hidden way around the silo, while Knox's father gets to vanish into the same place where that system operates. That's actually where I think the theory gets bigger, because we still have to account for where all of the stolen supplies have been going. Years of theft require somewhere to put the material, and critical supply is disappearing on a scale that goes far beyond somebody stealing a few useful parts for personal use. The grow light shortage alone tells us that equipment meant to support the silo for decades has been removed, and that's what makes me think there are people living somewhere inside the mining network who officially no longer exist. Knox's father gives us the first direct example of how that could work. Everyone thinks he died 2 years ago because Harwood arranged it that way, while Harwood knows the death was fake. A person who's officially dead can stay off the public stairs, stop appearing where former coworkers expect to see him, and spend his life somewhere ordinary. Silo residents rarely enter. If Harwood's done that for more than one person, the mines could contain a hidden population living underneath the official society of Silo 18. The stolen critical supply would then have a destination, and the grow lights become especially interesting, because a group living away from the normal farms would eventually need its own way of producing food. The show's already made the mines the perfect place for something like that. Harwood tells us they contain 300 years of shafts. People can disappear into them, and even judicial struggles to understand how Glenda is moving through the area. Orla's body sits inside a closed tunnel for days before anyone finds her, which gives us a pretty good sense of how much space down there exists beyond normal traffic. Knox's father being alive somewhere in that network would also bring the Season 2 conversation with Mark Chambers back in a much more useful way. Mark remembered Knox's father as the reason he made it out, which establishes that this man had already helped somebody escape something dangerous, long before we knew about Harwood's deal. That reputation fits a smuggler who knew hidden ways through the mines. Knox remembers the damage his father did to his family, while people in the Down Deep may remember somebody who could get them through places they were never supposed to reach. Both sides of him can exist at the same time, because being useful to people underground would never make him a good father to the son he abandoned. It also gives Knox a much more personal reason to become part of this mystery. He spent years staying away from his father, then finally goes looking and gets told the man died without ever speaking to him again. Episode 7 takes even that closure away by revealing his father chose to disappear and let Knox go on believing he was dead. So when Knox eventually learns the truth, he's going to have to deal with the fact that his father was close enough to Harwood to make a secret deal with him, while keeping his own son completely outside that life. Under this theory, the hidden route also explains how he managed to stay gone for so long. He never needed to rejoin the public silo because the thing he built gave him another way to move through it. Glenda then becomes one of the most important people in the whole story. Her father owns the secret, her former position in supply gave her access to the goods being stolen, and the surveillance footage already shows her traveling in a way the stairs can't explain. The route links her directly to both sides of the mystery. Orla stepped into the same supply position and started finding the trail Glenda had left behind. She noticed the missing stock, suspected construction, saw the gap, and went back to investigate, while whoever was protecting the operation made sure her body ended up hidden in the mines. Billings has been treating this as a murder investigation, but the evidence he's collecting is leading him toward the infrastructure behind the crime. The strange surveillance timing tells him there's a missing route. Carla's records tell him enormous amounts of material have been moving through that route, and Harwood's story about Knox's father gives him a man who built something valuable enough to earn a completely new identity. I also keep coming back to the Pact's mining restriction, because Harwood himself has no explanation for why miners are forbidden from going more than roughly 200 feet outward. 300 years of obeying that rule created this ridiculous web of tunnels doubling back through the same area, which happens to be exactly the environment somebody would need to hide a private transport route. We already know the lower parts of Silo 18 contain infrastructure ordinary residents were never supposed to discover, so the mines have always been sitting much closer to the silo's hidden systems than most people realize. Knox's father spent his life working down there, and a smuggler would have more reason than almost anyone to explore places other miners ignored. My theory is that Harwood's something was a permanent transport system built into those old shafts, using the same basic powered winch and cable technology Season 2 already established. It gave Harwood's people a private way to move quickly between the mines and higher parts of Silo 18, and Glenda's been using it to move herself and stolen critical supply without ever appearing on the normal staircase. Orla got close because construction exposed a gap connected to that route. Once she understood how Glenda was moving the supplies, the investigation could lead straight back to Harwood's network, so she was killed and hidden somewhere the fumigation could initially explain why a body had turned up underground. Knox's father then gives us the other purpose of the same system. Harwood helped him become dead to the rest of Silo 18, and I think he's been living somewhere inside that hidden network ever since, possibly alongside other people who've disappeared from official life. That would tie almost every part of this mystery together without needing a separate explanation for each clue. Glenda's travel time comes from the route, the missing critical supply moves through it, Orla dies after finding part of it, and Knox's father is the person who built it. It would also explain why Episode 7 waits until now to tell us he's alive. Billings is getting closer to the route. Knox has finally been dragged back into his father's world, and what Mark revealed is enough to tell us there's something physical still hidden in this story we haven't seen yet. My answer to the title is a hidden transport system running through the old mine shafts, one that can move people and cargo past the stairs, the porters, and the cameras. If Billings finds it, I think the missing critical supply and Knox's father are waiting at the same end of the trail.